I'm Alex, and I come from a pretty messed up family. I was raised by a controlling mom and her sisters, who were always getting involved. Megan, the oldest, was 13 years my senior, and Anna was 10 years older. I guess you could say I was an unplanned child. My parents separated when I was 5, and my dad left in 1977. He never came back. During my childhood, I was bullied a lot, at school and at home. All I wanted was my mom's love, just to be accepted, but that never happened. I was a good student, and I spent 12 years studying. Then, in 1993, I went to Kingston University in South London. I was glad to get away from my home life. It was there that I met Holly. I remember her like this: she was gorgeous and confident, while I was shy and introverted. Holly was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was working on a master's in mechanical engineering and design. I was too shy to approach her, but she attracted attention from men like it was nothing. She was 5 feet 5 inches with brown hair and brown eyes. She was gorgeous, but I didn't think I'd ever be able to talk to her. I was surprised that some of the guys she knew started talking to me at a party, and then Holly came over. I didn't have much experience with women, but she was a tall, beautiful woman. Her parents were on the retired side, and her sister Caroline was a bit of a social butterfly. I had a hard time with her being so entitled, and it made things difficult with me and Holly. But I was in love with her. After we graduated, we both found jobs and an apartment. The men who pursued Holly were outgoing and popular. I was surprised when one of her friends started talking to me at a party. That's how Holly and I got together. I was pretty shy, but I was also pretty confident. I asked her out, and we started dating. I'm not ashamed to admit that she took my virginity. But after about 6 months, there were rumors about her being with other men. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't say anything. Holly was a spoiled child, and her parents indulged her, her parents and her sister Caroline, which made our relationship a bit rocky. I put up with her entitled attitude and the fact that she loved creating public scenes and making me look bad, even though my friends told me to break up with her. I found myself in love, which was a whole new feeling for me. After we graduated, we both found jobs and an apartment outside of the city. We found a place in Southampton, New Hampshire, because of her family ties, and I had already cut all ties with mine. We got married a year later, and a year after that we had Sophie. Ava came a couple of years after that. Holly loved being a mom, and everything seemed perfect between us. Over time, I advanced in my career, and eventually I joined Walker Engineering 10 years ago. The higher salary and bonuses helped us save for a better house, but like a lot of people, 2008 was a tough year for us. A lot of people lost their jobs, and it got harder to get contracts, so we had to work longer hours without extra pay. It was during this time, with both girls in school full-time, that I started having second thoughts. Time that I found out about Holly's affair with a guy from our old university. I was busy with work, so I didn't realize what was going on until it was too late. At first, I wasn't sure who her lover was, but I thought it might be a classmate who had moved nearby. When I confronted Holly, she just laughed it off, but I could tell something was up. I found out about Holly's affair with a guy from our old university while I was busy with work. I didn't realize it was serious until it was too late. I had some suspicions about who her lover might be, thinking it could be a classmate who had moved nearby. But when I confronted Holly, she just laughed it off. I could tell she was being deceptive, but my stable job and income put me in a good position to buy a nice house. Holly always pushed me to buy a house that reflected our status, whatever that meant. Despite my reservations, I agreed, and we bought a lovely, detached, 5-bedroom house in Southampton. It was a buyer. The market was hot, so we got a good deal on a house, even though the mortgage was a bit high. I did something a little unusual, which was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my share of the bonus into it, and since I handled all the finances and banking as the only breadwinner, I doubt Holly even we got a good deal on the market, but the mortgage was a bit high. I did something a little unusual, which was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only deposited my share of the bonus into it, and since I handled all the finances and banking as the sole breadwinner, I doubt Holly even knew about it. Looking back, this turned out to be one of the smartest things I could have done. I needed some security because I wasn't sure if Holly planned to leave me. If her old flame returned after that incident, things seemed to return to normal. I knew about it even if I waved the receipts in front of her. Looking back, it was one of the smartest things I could have done. I needed some security because I wasn't sure if Holly planned to leave me if her old flame returned. After that incident, things seemed to return to normal, and my daughters remained my top priority. I supported their education and spent ample time with them on weekends, taking them to various activities like dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. Holly always seemed preoccupied with her outings with her indulgent and idle friends. I seldom socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed to be somewhat controlled by our wives to varying degrees. My friends teased me with the song Under My Thumb by the Rolling Stones whenever I had to cancel plans for what Holly wanted, even at work. My colleagues made comments about my marital situation, especially Holly's dominance over me. It wasn't until a few months ago that everything came to a head. Ava had just left for college, leaving Holly and me alone for the first time in 18 years. Both our daughters were attending our old alma mater, and I was helping Ava settle into her new apartment. Holly's always been the boss, but this last few months it's been crazy. Ava just left for college, so Holly and I were finally alone together again for the first time in 18 years. Both our daughters were at our old alma mater, and I was helping Ava move into her new apartment with her sister. Then Ava turned to me and started asking why I was still with their mom. I was totally caught off guard. Ava's always been quiet like her dad. Then I heard she's been messing around with Henry Walker at your company. Ava said, crying, and I was like, what? I didn't even know, but I wasn't too shocked. Over the years, I could have looked into her affairs, but I didn't, cause I was afraid it'd break up the family and cause my daughters to resent me, just like my sisters did. My dad put up with her cheating cause I couldn't bear to lose what we had built together, even though I still loved her. This revelation had a few effects on. First, it made me realize how much my daughter hates their mother. I mean, I had no idea. Second, it brought up old feelings from when I was growing up and how they influence my weaknesses. And third, I realized I was the subject of gossip and ridicule at work, particularly from Henry Walker, who just so happened to be the nephew of the owner and the one who betrayed me. I felt completely lost, unable to deal with this situation, especially now that my youngest daughter knew about the mockery from Holly. I knew I had to talk to her. My heart was beating super fast as I sat at the kitchen table. I was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come back, and when she finally showed up, I couldn't say a word. She just looked at me like she didn't care, and I could tell she was judging me. But I finally got the courage to ask her about her relationship with. I was waiting for Holly to come back to the table when she finally came back. I couldn't say anything. She just looked at me like she didn't care and was annoyed. I finally got the courage to say something. I asked Holly about her relationship with someone else. She said it wasn't an affair and it wasn't that important. I felt shocked and disgusted. I wanted to know how she could say it wasn't that bad. She said she liked me because I provide for her and we're friends, but there were certain things about me that she didn't like. She said she wouldn't call it an affair, and that it wasn't that serious. I felt shocked and disgusted, and I was waiting for her to explain how she could justify what she'd done. She said she admired me as a provider and a friend, but that there were certain things I couldn't do for her. I was upset by her straightforward admission, and I asked if that meant she was cheating on me. Holly said it was just her body, not her heart or mind. I was stunned by her bold admission, and I didn't know what to say. She casually mentioned that she was exploring relationships. I was shocked by her straightforward admission that she was having an affair. Holly clarified that it was only her body, not her heart or mind. Stunned by her bold admission, I was left speechless. She casually mentioned exploring relationships with younger men. Startled, I raised my voice and questioned her actions. Holly cautioned me not to shout and, despite admitting to being involved with 2 other men, she expected my silence. She threatened me with the choice of accepting her terms or risking her departure to be with someone else. I remained silent, hoping she would notice the pain on my face. Attempting to justify her actions, she claimed that such behavior was common among her friends and could even improve a marriage. I was appalled by her attempt to use her friend's actions as a justification, considering it contemptible and selfish. She made a joke about having another woman, but I just laughed and told her she was full of it. She said that our relationship would continue on her terms and warned me not to ruin a good thing. In reality, she was right. I was loyal and compliant with her wishes throughout our 22-year relationship. Now, everyone knew I was being betrayed, and my reputation was tarnished among friends and colleagues. The next morning, I entered my office and was met by Henry Walker, the man involved with my wife. He smirked and asked about Alex's Wells. With his smug expression making me even more annoyed, I decided to keep quiet by the coffee machine. I heard some guys laughing, but they didn't seem to be having much fun either. I kept going, feeling pretty exposed, and even Olivia, the boss's secretary, looked like she was enjoying the show. Sitting at my desk, I thought about the bad start to my day, feeling like everyone was laughing at me, both at work and at home. Even though I tried to focus, I couldn't shake my anger. I decided to look into my dad's background, knowing only his birthplace and that he left at 38. My boss's smug expression was getting on my nerves. I kept quiet by the coffee machine. I heard some men laughing, but they didn't seem to care. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, seemed to think my situation was funny. I sat down at my desk and thought about the bad start to my day. I felt like everyone was laughing at me, at work and at home. I tried to focus, but I couldn't stop feeling angry. I decided to look into my dad's background. All I knew was where he was born and that he left at 38. In 1977, I was looking for family history sites for Cambridgeshire. I found 3 possible matches. I thought he might have died before I went to college. I asked on genealogy websites. I was thinking about it, and my boss, Jack, called me to his office. Jack was successful, but he wasn't a very good person. He wanted to talk, even though he was thinking about leaving because of how he was acting. I stayed because of the money and because he was persuasive. I found out that he was having an affair with his secretary, Olivia. His wife didn't know about it. Back in '77, I was looking into my family history and found a bunch of potential matches for my dad. I narrowed it down to 3 and posted on some genealogy websites. I was kinda lost in thought, and my boss, Jack, called me into his office. Jack was a pretty successful guy, but he had a bit of a shady past. He wanted to talk, even though he was thinking about leaving because of how he'd been acting. I couldn't tell if he was joking or not, but he did mention some rumors about my wife cheating on his 3rd wife. I just kind of laughed and said something about her being with my nephew. He started laughing about how the family always had a reputation for being playboys, and then he just kinda stopped talking. He started talking about business, saying how important family was and that if personal stuff messed with the business, he might have to quit. It was like he was a strict teacher scolding a child. I bit my lip, and I saw Olivia, his secretary, standing there. I heard some rumors about my wife cheating on me, so I told him about her relationship with my nephew. He laughed about the whole family being wild, and then he started talking about business. He said that family was important and that if personal issues affected the business, I might have to leave the company. It was like he was a strict teacher scolding a child. I bit my lip and saw Olivia, his secretary, standing by the door. She was probably getting information to share with her friends. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but wonder why a young woman like her would be with an older man like Jack Walker. As I walked away, I heard more snickering, and I lowered my head and walked away. When I closed the door, I heard a lot of laughter, and I realized they were laughing at me. When I got back to my office, I realized that my presence there was pointless. I had paid for my daughter's education, but now I was the one financing my. As I was about to leave, I saw a young woman who I thought was my daughter's friend, Rachel, looking at me. I couldn't help but wonder why she would be hanging out with an older guy like Jack Walker. As I passed by, I heard some snickering, and I lowered my head and walked away. When I got to my office, I realized that I wasn't doing anything there. I had paid for my daughter's education, but now I was paying for my wife's infidelities. I was a simple guy who liked his gadgets, but I could live without any big spending. Most of my money went to Holly's indulgences, and I started to wonder if I was happy. This was my creative hub, and it was where I found success. I had designed a lot of the parts that were being produced and sold here, and I was sure I could find another job. They thought I was weak, and they were right. I wasn't one to cause trouble, and I was happy being Alex, the submissive engineer. I was on the computer, minding my own business, when I got a message from Jennifer Holmes of the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. I was floored that she'd responded so quickly. I read the message, and I was amazed. Jennifer had read my inquiry about my dad and had connected with a woman claiming to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I replied right away with my contact information, hoping to hear from Rachel soon. I was pretty relieved when I got off work, and when I got home, I was shocked to find a message from Jennifer Holmes, from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee, in my inbox. I was amazed by the quick response. Jennifer had read my inquiry about my dad and had connected with a woman claiming to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I replied right away with my contact information, hoping to hear from Rachel soon. When I got home, Holly greeted me with a smile while she was cooking dinner. I tried to take a step back, but I ended up staying for the meal. She softly asked if we could discuss the previous night. I told her that it seemed there was little left to discuss, as she had made her stance clear. She almost pleaded, acknowledging my qualities as a husband and requesting that I not deny her anything. I questioned her betrayal and humiliation, seeking an honest answer. Flustered, she shrugged, unable to provide her at home. Holly greeted me with a smile while she was cooking dinner. I tried to take a step back at first, but I ended up staying for the meal. She asked if we could talk about what happened the night before. I told her that it seemed like there wasn't much left to talk about, since she had made her position clear. She almost begged, saying that I was a good husband and asking me not to deny her anything. I asked her about her betrayal and humiliation, and she was nervous and couldn't answer. I got tired of her being selfish, and I thought about how I was trying to make her happy even though I was working long hours to pay the bills and buy what we needed. All I got from her was disrespect and ridicule. I even drove an old car so she could have a new one. She said she had needs that I couldn't fulfill, and she gave me an ultimatum: either I accept it, or she would go find satisfaction with a younger man. I interrupted and said Henry Walker's name, telling her that everyone knew I was pretty annoyed with her being so selfish. I thought about how I was working so many hours just to pay the bills and buy the things we needed, and all she did was treat me like crap. I even drove an old car so she could have a new one. She knew I had needs that she couldn't meet, so she gave me an ultimatum: either I accept it, or she would go find satisfaction with a younger guy. I jumped in and said Henry Walker's name, telling her that everyone knew he was involved with her. She just said it was true and that he was basically my boss and would get the company. She explained the deal, saying he'd take care of her in bed, and if I didn't go along with it, she'd leave me and he'd give her everything else she wanted and needed. As usual, I didn't say anything, just got up and left, heading back to my study. I was crying, and I really wanted to be anywhere but there. The phone rang, and I answered, only to hear an unfamiliar voice on the other end. I was involved with her. She admitted to the relationship, telling me that he was basically my boss and would take over the company. She explained the situation, said he met her needs in bed, and that if I didn't do what she said, she would leave me. He would give her everything else she wanted and needed. As usual, I didn't say anything and just got up from my seat, heading to my study. Tears came down my face, and I really wanted to be anywhere but there. The phone rang, and I answered to hear an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else disappeared from my mind. I had a huge smile on my face. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to explore my father's past and had a lot to share. I found out that my mother had forced my father out of the house, deceiving me throughout my childhood. Sadly, he died in 1983, when I was just 11. He died from alcohol poisoning, and my grandmother always blamed my mother for his behavior and mental state. Rachel told me, I thought that after we broke up, he really wanted to get back together with me, but something kept holding him up. We decided to meet up at her place in Cambridge over the weekend. I was pretty excited, thinking the break would do me some good. But the weekend just dragged on, and nothing at home or work really changed. At work, everyone kept teasing me behind my back. Henry and his friends thought it was funny to put a pair of underwear on my office door. I looked over at Olivia, but she didn't say anything. Inside the underwear, there was a post. I read the note that said, "Please return to your wife." I was devastated. I sat at my desk and cried again that day. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I couldn't wait. When Saturday came, I told Holly I was visiting a friend in London, and she seemed indifferent to my plans. I suspected she would be unfaithful, so being away made it easier for her. The journey to Cambridge proved. I read the note that said, "Please return to your wife." I was devastated. I sat at my desk and cried again that day. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I couldn't wait. When Saturday came, I told Holly I was visiting a friend in London, and she seemed indifferent to my plans. I suspected she would be unfaithful, so being away made it easier for her. The trip to Cambridge was stressful, and I arrived at Rachel's house an hour later than expected. Surprisingly, she greeted me with the warmest hug I'd received in years. Seemingly unfazed by the delay, I met her husband, Greg, and their children, Grace and William. After that, we talked about my father and newfound family. Rachel's warm and selfless demeanor was evident as she and Greg talked. They were so excited to share our family story, and it was clear they were eager to get to know me. David and Lucy Price, my cousin and Rachel's brother, were there too, and we got along great. We talked about my dad and family. After lunch, we took a short trip, and I got to think about our trip. David and I talked about our jobs and family lives, and I felt like I was able to open up to him. My new cousins were super supportive. They told me not to put up with my current situation, and they were right. I'd been lied to and mistreated a lot, but they made me feel better. They were so kind and honest. It made me realize that I need to be happy for myself and for my daughters and friends, and for this new family. We got back home at 8:00 p.m. I found Holly getting ready to go out. I asked her about her plans, and she said she was going out with her friends. I was surprised, so I mentioned her second paramour, Max. She begged me to stop bringing it up. I told her to stop and be my wife, even though I knew she wasn't. She insisted that she was and always would be my wife. She asked me not to deny her pleasures, promising to make life easy for me. At 12:00 a.m., I found Holly getting ready to go out. I asked what she was doing, and she said she was going out with her friends. I was surprised, and she said it was just her and Max, not paramour. I told her to stop talking about it, but she wouldn't. She said she was and always would be my wife, and she asked me not to deny her pleasures and promised to make life easy for me. I told her to come back by midnight, but she ignored me and tried to hug me. I turned away and grabbed my Prada bag as she left. I told her I was her husband, and she looked at me like she was questioning my authority before laughing and asking what I would do. She said I would never have the courage to leave. She was sure she'd be back by midnight, but I told her no way. She kept on threatening me, trying to hug me, but I turned away. She grabbed her Prada handbag and went to the door, acting like she was my wife. I told her very seriously that she wasn't going to do whatever she wanted. She paused, looking at me like she was wondering if I was really her husband, and then she started laughing, joking around, and asked what I was going to do, acting like she thought I'd never leave her. I felt like a total fool. I realized that I'd been a fool for a long time, always doing what she wanted and not thinking about my own needs. It was time to stop pretending and make some real changes. I didn't waste any time. Actually, I started while she was out with Henry or Max, or maybe both together. That's probably what she meant by enjoying herself and having it all. My thoughts were running away. I felt angry and couldn't focus. I decided I needed to stop loving her. I found a box with a picture of my mom and sisters in it. I cut out a picture of Holly's face and pasted it next to the others. I added Holly's smirking face to the picture to sever my emotional ties. I put it on my desk around 12:45 a.m. I finished the task I'd mostly come up with. I was working on I finished most of my short-term plans, even though putting them into action might take a few weeks. Luckily, I had plenty of time, since Holly wasn't expecting my departure. I had convinced myself to go through with it, even though I was uncertain and needed help. Then, I heard someone entering clumsily through the door and peeking out the window. I saw Henry Walker leaving as I heard her going up the stairs. I quickly cleared my browsing history. I decided to use incognito mode from then on. After she left, I went to our bedroom to make some coffee. I thought about my future away from here, especially without my daughters. I decided to move closer to them on Monday morning. I headed to work, determined not to exert myself any longer. I didn't care about the remarks and laughter directed at me. I arranged a bank meeting for 1 p.m. I used the time before to review my finances, though it was a gamble. If I was successful and had the right support, I'd come out relatively unscathed. The meeting went as planned, allowing me to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account with a tidy sum in hand. I shut down the savings account for cash on the way back to the office. I stopped at a PC World and purchased 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 tough drive and a new PC hard drive. When I got back, I started looking at the company's private customer files. It took me an hour to figure out Jack's password. Ironically, his wife's name and his 6. I got the password to Jack's computer by going through his wife's birthday. I downloaded all the files to the drive, along with my plans and designs for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system, which should help the company keep doing well. We made pumps for air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy industry. After clearing my PC history, including all plans and work, I shut it down, swapped out the hard drive for a new one, packed everything in my bag, and reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day on the phone, researching competitors and browsing engineering jobs in the South London area on Monster. I called it a day that evening after another quiet dinner. I retired to my study and found out that a major competitor, which had struggled during the financial downturn, was seeking a mechanical engineer for basic design and shop floor management. I was intrigued by the position, even though it wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was close, though, and I was willing to make the 10,000 difference. I spent the rest of the day on my phone, looking up competitors and checking out engineering jobs in the South London area on Monster. I called it a night after another quiet dinner. That evening, I went to my study and found out that a big competitor that had struggled during the financial downturn was looking for a mechanical engineer for basic design and shop floor management. I was intrigued, even though it wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was close, though, and I was getting paid 10,000 less than I was at my current job. I quickly emailed them my CV to keep it professional. With Holly, I decided to sleep in our marital bed that night. But I made sure to sleep when she came in. Her touch made me feel sick to my stomach, but it felt good to react that way. I was starting to feel sick to my stomach by her. This would help me in the long run. The next day, Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics called. He was surprised that I was thinking about leaving Walker Engineering for his smaller firm. He almost offered me the job right away, but I asked to interview with him the next day. He agreed. Everything was falling into place, and things were moving quickly. I started looking for an apartment in the area and found one just 15 minutes from my daughters and 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a tour for the day after my interview with Robert Williams. I told him, and he was cool with it. I found the perfect place, and everything was going smoothly. I started looking for apartments in the area and found one just 15 minutes from my daughters and 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a tour for the next day after talking with Robert Williams. I told Jack I was going to visit my daughters in Kingston to sign some papers the next day, and he said it was all right. That night, I called my friend Toby Brown and set up to meet him and his wife, Sarah, the next evening after my interview and apartment viewing. Toby and Sarah knew something was up and were excited to hear about it. I told them I had something on my mind, and they were really supportive. At the meeting with Toby and Sarah, I told them what I was planning to do. They were surprised, but they also understood. I told my daughters what was going on, and they were cool about it. They were surprised that I was standing up for myself, but they understood. Then, Sarah asked if I was going to leave Holly, and I said I was. She got me another cup of tea. I told them about the meeting with my cousins, like how my mom kicked my dad out and my sisters took her side. I said my daughter was on my side. Sarah asked about my decision to leave Holly, and I told her about the stuff I learned in the meeting with my cousins. I told her about how my mom kicked my dad out of the house and how my sisters took her side. I said that my daughter supported me this time. Toby said he was worried and asked if what I learned at the meeting made me want to stand up for myself. I told him that it was during a visit to my dad's grave that I noticed something on the stone, which shocked me and made me decide to leave. At the same time, they both asked what I'd seen on the memorial stone. I told them it had a picture of a rose with the words "in loving memory," and my dad's birth date and age when he died. It was the same as my age now. Toby and Sarah looked a little shocked, which showed that they got it. I said that when I was faced with these moments, I had to make a choice. That could lead to an emotional affair, or worse, as my grandmother believed. I decided not to follow my father's example and instead chose to fight back. I continued, explaining that I wouldn't sacrifice myself trying to be the perfect husband any longer, enduring misuse and ridicule. I confessed to my friends that I felt vulnerable about how low I had sunk. Sarah offered to help and shared her plan to protect herself and get back at Holly. I smiled and nodded, appreciating Sarah's toughness despite my previous suspicions about her affair. I explained my financial strategy, saying that in 2008, I had set up a separate savings account and put all my bonuses into it. I explained that I'd set up a separate savings account for all my bonuses and extra cash, and that it only needed my name on it to secure a mortgage. This made it easier for me to apply a loan. I told him about Toby's role in transferring ownership of my house to a new company he'd create to settle the mortgage. He voiced skepticism about the plan, but I assured him. I told him Holly wouldn't be able to contest it because her religious parents, upon discovering her infidelity, would prioritize their principles over supporting her. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage, which would allow me to delay paying the mortgage on my way home. I visited the local Land Rover dealership. I told him that Holly wouldn't have the money to fight it. I said that her religious parents, if they found out about her cheating, would stick to their principles and not support her. They agreed, and they even offered to help cover the mortgage, which let me delay the payment on my way home. I went to the local Land Rover dealership, where I negotiated to trade Holly's car for the newest model. We cancelled the payment plan for the Range Rover Sport that she had, and the dealership got the car back. I told the dealer that I would come back for my own upgrade, and I knew he could get the money back for Holly's car by selling it as is. I apologized for any trouble and explained that the idea of selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made up for it. I picked up a 2016 brochure, not for myself, but for Holly. When I got home, she was sitting in the living room with a coffee and looking pale. I took off my jacket and I apologized for the trouble and explained that the chance to sell me a new Range Rover was more than worth it. I picked up a 2016 brochure, not for myself, but for Holly. When I got home, she was sitting in the living room with a coffee and looking pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag on the floor, getting ready to do the second part of the plan. I told Holly how much I love her and that I want her to have the best. I said that I would trade in her car and buy her a new 2017 model, pointing to it in the brochure. She was excited about it, so she said she loves the new car. She was so caught up in the moment that she didn't even notice my plan. She said the only hitch was that they already had a buyer for my car. She said she'd take it to the dealership by Friday afternoon and leave work early to do it. She said I should use her car for the weekend to visit my lover, which would leave her free. She looked shocked and confused when I said that, and I asked her what was wrong. She didn't say much, but she asked if I was still upset about our deal. I told her it wasn't our deal, it was hers, and I was just trying to make her feel better. I looked at her, totally shocked and confused. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she was talking about the situation. She didn't give me any details, but she asked if I was still upset about our deal. I told her it wasn't our deal, it was hers, and I didn't have a say in it. I asked if I had to accept it, and she just nodded, like she was in charge, and I had to go along with it. She said she loved me, and I felt really bad for her. I didn't say anything, and I just walked into the kitchen. My phone started ringing, so I went to the back garden to answer it. Toby confirmed the money had been transferred, so I was good to go the next day. I went to the bank and they showed me into the mortgage specialist office. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off and all my remaining accounts were closed. I walked a few doors down and opened a new account with another bank. I was content knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything again unless Holly pursued legal action and took me to court. My smile faded the next day, though. I contacted the land registry and completed the appropriate online application with all the details. I went to another bank the next day and opened an account. I was happy knowing I wouldn't have to pay again unless Holly took me to court, but my smile faded when I remembered that I still had to do the same thing with Toby and Sarah's new company. I filled out the online application for their company in less than 10 minutes. I got a confirmation email that said it would take 3 to 5 days to complete. Once it was done, I would just hand over the deeds to Toby, and he could register the property under their company that same day. I knocked on Jack's door, and Olivia was with him as usual. Fridays were usually when he'd have his way with her, and I think I interrupted their closeness activities. She left us alone, putting my resignation on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face. He asked about the document in my hands. I told him it was my resignation and said that Fridays were usually when he'd have his way with her, and I think I interrupted their closeness activities. She left us alone, and I left my resignation on his desk. He looked up at me with that stupid smirk on his face. He asked about the document in my hands. I told him it was my resignation and said that I thought it'd be best to leave immediately, considering the situation with our families. I suggested that he might not want me around for too long. He looked pretty shocked by the news. I asked that my P45 be ready by Monday and said I didn't want to mention my departure to anyone. Holly didn't know he'd pleaded. I told him that I thought it'd be best to leave right away, especially since of the situation with our families. I said that I figured he might not want me around for too long. He looked pretty shocked by the news. I told him that I wanted my P45 ready by Monday and that I wasn't going to mention my departure to anyone. I said that Holly didn't know he'd pleaded. I was pretty insistent that they needed me, but I told him they apparently needed his nephew more. I said I'd come back on Monday to get the last of my stuff. I also said I'd take a digital recorder out of my sock to use the opportunity to remove a pin from my pocket. I hit record and put it under the seat and in the wooden frame. As I stood back up, I said I had things to do and left his office. To top it off, I told him not to come crawling back when his broke, suggesting that the only thing keeping his cheating. I hit record, put the pin under the seat, and put it in the wooden frame. Then I stood up and said I had to go. I told him not to come crawling back when his broke, saying that the only thing keeping his cheating wife with him was his money. I smiled, knowing that it hit a nerve. I left his office an hour later. I drove home, picked up Holly's car and logbook, and dropped off her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to drive me home, and I accepted, gratefully. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at his money was tied up in that woman. I smiled, knowing it was a sore spot. I left his office an hour later. I drove home, picked up Holly's car and logbook, and dropped off her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to drive me home, and I accepted, grateful. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she had been crying. I asked her what happened, and she reluctantly told me she had contracted gonorrhea. I laughed. Oh, did I laugh? She just glared at me. He suggested taking the medications to get back to normal, and the tension in the air was palpable that night. I knew she had been crying because of the bags under her eyes. She told me she had gonorrhea, and I laughed. She glared at me. He said to take the meds to get back to normal, and it was clear we were both pretty tense. I slept well that night, which was a first in months. I slept in the spare room the next morning, and I felt great. The good night's sleep had done wonders for me. I went into our bedroom and gently woke Holly, explaining that I was giving her space to rest and recuperate. Holly said she thought I found her disgusting, which was surprising. I slept like a log the night before, and when I woke up, I felt great. I went into our bedroom and gently woke Holly, telling her I was giving her space to rest and recuperate. She said she thought I found her disgusting, but I didn't say anything. Tears started streaming down her cheeks as she admitted to messing up big time. She said she loved me and wanted me to get better. At first, I felt sorry for her, but that feeling left pretty quickly. Then, I realized that I had lost all. I didn't say much when she started crying and said she messed up big time. She said she loved me and wanted me to get better. At first, I felt sorry for her, but that feeling didn't last long. Then I realized that I didn't feel anything for the woman I'd been married to for 21 years. I guess true love can fade so fast. I was done, and her situation didn't change. Mindy left the room without saying a word. I got into my car and drove off. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who hosted a dinner. I had a hard time believing that love could fade so quickly. I was done, and her situation didn't change my mind. I left the room without saying a word, got into my car, and drove off. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who hosted a dinner party with many friends and colleagues. When I returned home late Sunday morning, I found Holly up doing chores. She walked into the living room, rushed towards me, and hugged me when she saw me. I simply patted her on the back, excitedly. I suggested arranging for the new car to arrive and offered to drop her off. I had a late Sunday morning party with a bunch of friends and colleagues. When I got back, Holly was up doing chores and walked into the living room. She rushed over to me and gave me a hug. I gave her a quick pat on the back, excitedly, and said we should get the new car to arrive, and I'd drop her off in town to meet her sister, who could then drive her to the dealership. I imagined her driving back in the new Range Rover, and she smiled, approaching me with open arms. I pretended not to notice her. Throughout the day, Holly showed a lot of affection, which made me feel uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding excuses to leave by bedtime. I noticed she had been crying again, and I wished her good night. She asked if I would be. I met her sister at the dealership, and she gave me a ride back to town. I imagined her driving the new Range Rover, and she smiled and came over to me with open arms. I pretended not to notice her. Holly showed a lot of affection, which made me feel uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding excuses to leave by bedtime. I noticed she had been crying again, and she wished me good night. She asked if I would sleep with her and said she wanted to cuddle up and hear reassurances. I told her that wouldn't happen until she got the all clear from the doctor. I told her she made her bed, and she retorted bitterly, saying that when she got better, she was sure she could find a man willing to be in bed with her, as she had plenty of lost time to make up for. I chuckled to myself. It took longer than expected, but there it was, and the harshness was back. I didn't regret anything from Friday night, but I was still pretty resentful. I would have fallen for her manipulations before, but this time I ignored her tears and went to the spare room. It was going to be my last night in my house, and it would be in the spare room. I was also relieved she said those things. It erased any lingering doubts I might have had. As I looked at my doctored picture of her and my sisters, all I felt was hatred for her. She was only sweet when I was hoping to get something, but I was pretty upset when I didn't get it. I woke up early on Monday morning. Holly was up early too, for her 8:30 hair appointment, so I drove her into town, as planned. I drove off, knowing it could be the last time I ever saw her. I feared it wouldn't be, but I was determined to make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and ended both our contracts. I pulled over into a lobby and paid the penalty on my card. They informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5:00 p.m. The next step was ideal. I went to the office to pick up my P45. When I stepped into the factory, I noticed the atmosphere was somber. Word of my departure had apparently spread, and my colleagues looked at me like I was a bad thing. I wasn't sure why they were so freaked out, but I made my way to my office, passing by the coffee machine where the usual group was hanging out. It was 10:00 a.m. As I made my way to the office to pick up my P45, I stepped into the factory, and it was clear that something was off, the usual commotion in the air, and my colleagues looked at me like I was a ghost. I made my way down the corridor toward my office, passing by the coffee machine where the usual group was gathered. I was unsure if Max and Henry were aware of their shared involvement with my wife. They grinned at me, exchanging jokes with others. I greeted them with false cheer, saying good morning. They asked about my wife, prompting the usual laughter at the recurring joke, which I failed to find amusing. I replied that she wasn't doing well, attributing it to one of them giving her an unwelcome surprise. I left. Max and Henry knew about my wife, and they gave me a little smirk. They chatted with others, and I said good morning to them, but they didn't seem to be having it. They asked about my wife, and everyone started laughing at the same old joke. I told them she wasn't doing well, and I said it was because of one of them. I left, and they were stunned when I looked back. They had their jaws dropped. There was a lot of commotion before I went upstairs. Olivia gave me a half smile and lowered her head, maybe showing that I was now earning some respect. Jack showed up at the door before I could knock. He said he had what I wanted, and he told me to take it and get out. I was met with stunned silence. When I glanced back, their jaws dropped, and there was a bit of a commotion before I headed upstairs and approached Olivia. She offered a half smile and lowered her head, perhaps indicating that I was now earning some respect. Jack appeared at the door before I could knock. He said he had what I wanted and instructed me to take it and get out. Perhaps that was all in my imagination. I entered his office and sat down discreetly, slipping a recorder into my pocket from under the chair. I knew he'd had his usual Friday rendezvous with Olivia, and now I had it recorded. He snapped, inquiring if I had another job lined up. I initially ignored him, but I relented and replied that I had nothing lined up. A smirk played across his face, likely I imagined respect as I walked into his office. I sat down, discreetly slipping a recorder into my pocket from under the chair. I knew he'd had his usual Friday rendezvous with Olivia, and now I had it recorded. He snapped, inquiring if I had another job lined up. I ignored him at first, but then I relented and replied that I had nothing lined up. A smirk played across his face, likely assuming I would come crawling back. I inquired about my final month's pay and end of bonus, to which he burst into laughter. Olivia entered with my P4, and when she asked what was amusing, Jack explained that I had requested my bonus and pay, finding it rich. Olivia chimed in, laughing along, deciding to join in. I responded with laughter, causing them to pause and stare at me. I asked about my final month's pay and end of bonus, and he cracked up. Olivia came in with my P4, and when she asked what was so funny, Jack explained that I had asked for my bonus and pay. Finding it amusing, Olivia joined in, laughing, and decided to join in, too. I responded with laughter, causing them to pause and stare at me. Incredulously, Olivia questioned why I was laughing, and I retorted, asking her why she let the old man take advantage of her every week. My laughter intensified, and they froze, with Olivia's eyes widening as Jack flushed with rage. In response, Jack spewed out, calling me a scoundrel and instructing me to get out of his office and his company before he had the boys drag me out. I couldn't stop laughing, and Olivia asked me why. I told her that she should know better than to let that old guy take advantage of her every week. I kept laughing, and they were all frozen. Olivia's eyes got really big, and Jack got all red and angry. He started yelling at me, calling me a scoundrel and telling me to get out of his office. He said he'd have the boys drag me out by my ears if I didn't. I left my office, laughing to myself, and got my stuff. When I got home, I unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk, and went into the house. I looked around, thinking about what to take with me. I grabbed a couple of Romero Bridaux paintings and wrapped them in plastic from the garage. Then, I loaded them into my car. I went around. I left my office with a laugh, collecting the last of my stuff. Still laughing, I got home, unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk, and went into the house. I looked around, thinking about what to take. I grabbed a few Romero Bridaux artworks, wrapped them in plastic from the garage, and put them in my car. I went around the house, collecting various items, then emptied my closet upstairs. I locked away all my important paperwork, including the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate, in the safe. Using a loft ladder, I got my old stuff, including my degree and family photos. In the master bedroom I gathered all the jewelry I had given Holly over the years, totaling over $10,000 in value. I also took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had bought. In fact, the entire wardrobe was my acquisition, so I claimed it all. Given my meticulous record-keeping for insurance purposes, it would prove beneficial when selling everything. After finishing packing, I realized I'd need a TV, so I grabbed that along with my movie collection and the Blu-ray player. By this point, my car was packed to the brim. I decided to ditch all of Holly's clothes and a few other unnecessary items, including some of my old clothes. I knew me would need a new wardrobe, and the girls would gladly help me out. I gathered the best pictures of me and the girls and packed them in the car. There wasn't any real rush, since Holly wouldn't be back until after 2:00 p.m. I took a moment to make a cup of tea. I think it's in the Magna Carta I called the TV company, cancelled the satellite phone and internet. I also contacted British Gas and Southern Water to cancel utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed, and I had an idea. I looked over and saw Holly's wedding dress at the top. It was in a dusty old box in the wardrobe. She loved it probably more than I did. I took it down and found our wedding album among the box of photographs on the bed. I grabbed the duvet cover, gathered everything, and headed to the garden. I dumped everything into a pile, including Holly's clothes and belongings. I couldn't sell them, so I left her underwear untouched because I didn't want any reminders. I closed up the car and checked the time. It was only 1:45 p.m. I called up Robert Williams and told him I'd drop off my P45 later with the night shift. Eager to start fresh tomorrow, he seemed pleased, and I hoped I'd brightened his day at 2 p.m. I called him again. I was waiting for the call, and I found some paint thinners in the garage and poured them all over the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. I answered, and Holly's voice came through, demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant, insisting that I shouldn't play dumb. She continued to question me. I asked her to calm down and inquired about what was happening. There was silence. I was waiting for the call, so I grabbed some paint thinners from the garage and poured them all over the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. I answered, and it was Holly. She started yelling at me, asking what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant. I insisted that I shouldn't play dumb, but she wouldn't stop. I asked her to calm down and asked what was happening. There was silence, and I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister in the background. She said that she had been told I didn't get her a new car, but sold hers instead. Teasingly, I mentioned that I might have forgotten to mention that. She started to sound panicked, asking what was going on. I kept my cool, even though my heart was beating out of my chest. I told her that from now on, if she wanted a car, she could pay for it herself. She yelled in response, expressing confusion. I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister in the background. She said she'd been told I didn't get her a new car, but sold hers instead. Teasingly, I mentioned that I might have forgotten to mention that she started to sound panicked, asking what was going on. I remained calm despite my racing heart. I told her that from now on, if she wanted a car, she could pay for it herself. She yelled in response, expressing confusion. I reiterated that she heard me just fine and added that I needed to tidy up the kitchen. She questioned if it was some kind of sick joke, to which I said nothing. She declared that we would talk about it when she got home, expressing her dissatisfaction with being pranked. I remained silent. I hung up the phone amidst her continued screams of my name. Stepping outside, I struck a match and ignited the fire. Our history went up in flames as I walked away. I said again that she heard me just fine, and then I told her she needed to tidy up the kitchen. She asked if that was some kind of sick joke, but I didn't say anything. She said we'd talk about it when she got home, and she was mad because she thought I was pranking her. I didn't say anything else. I hung up the phone, and she kept screaming my name. I went outside, lit a match, and set the paper on fire. I took our marriage certificate out of my pocket, tore it into shreds, and left it on the kitchen table with a picture of us at Disneyland. I thought about if she thought about those moments, too. I got in my car and drove off. I was almost at the end of the street when I saw Holly and Jennifer in my rearview mirror. I drove faster, didn't look at the road, and smiled. I turned off my phone and drove on by 400 p.m. I decided to go to Sutton, and I figured I'd have some time. I stopped by a nearby phone shop to set up a new mobile contract. I also caught the admin team at work to handle my P45 and met Freya, my new secretary. Unlike Olivia, she was professional, even though she was young. I went back to my empty apartment, made a cup of tea with a kettle I'd brought from home, unpacked, and ordered pizza for dinner. I got to Sutton, and since I had time, I went to a nearby phone shop to set up a new mobile contract. I also caught the admin team at work to handle my P45 and met Freya, my new secretary. Unlike Olivia, she was professional, even though she was young. I went back to my empty apartment, made a cup of tea with a kettle I'd brought from home, unpacked, and ordered pizza for dinner. I checked my old phone and saw it was disconnected. I smiled, knowing Holly was now without a phone too. I let the girls rest for a bit before I made contact. I set up my sleeping bag in the living room and waited for dinner. The furniture was coming over the weekend, but for now, I was glad to be away from Holly. I turned on my laptop and accessed recordings from Jack Walker's. I checked my old phone and saw it was disconnected. I smirked, knowing Holly was now without a phone too. I gave the girls some time before my inevitable contact. I set up my sleeping bag in the lounge and waited for dinner. The furniture was coming over the weekend, but for now, I was glad to be away from Holly. I turned on my laptop and accessed recordings from Jack Walker's office. They revealed his affair with Olivia. After uploading the evidence, I made copies on USB sticks and addressed them to Jack's wife, Margaret, and Olivia's boyfriend, Peter. I planned to mail them the next day. Finally, I phoned my daughter, Sophie, to update her and caution her against telling her mother about me. She hadn't yet, given Holly's lack of communication. Office revealed his affair with Olivia after uploading the evidence. I made copies on USB sticks, addressed them to Jack's wife, Margaret, and Olivia's boyfriend, Peter, and planned to mail them the next day. Lastly, I phoned my daughter, Sophie, to update her, cautioning her against informing her mother of my whereabouts, which she hadn't done yet. Holly's lack of communication meant that over the following week, I furnished my flat and began diverting customers from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Despite a few loyal to Jack, most preferred our offerings, leading to Walker's loss. I anticipated Jack's discovery of the reason for his business decline, but remained indifferent. With utilities cut off at my former home, Hollywood realized my absence as she struggled with bills. Toby initiated the home sale process, backed by Sarah's enthusiasm and by weeks. Over the next week, I got my flat ready for new tenants and started sending customers from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Most of them liked our deals better, so Walker lost business. I knew Jack would figure out why his business was down, but I didn't care. My utilities were cut off at my old place, and Hollywood realized I wasn't there when she was trying to pay the bills. Toby started the process of selling the house, with Sarah and weak support. During this time, A contacted me and told me Holly was moving back to her parents' place, where her parents weren't happy about her cheating on them. Holly was angry at me, but it felt good to me. I knew the saga wasn't over, though. By the weekend, Toby and Sarah had another successful dinner party, which was a break from my plan to leave on Sunday. I got some good news. After just a week on the market, I got 2 serious offers for $550,000, and I accepted immediately. I arranged for the girls and investments, making sure Toby was compensated and securing a portion in cash for my safety. Protecting myself remained a priority as the week progressed. Toby's news that the sale could move swiftly filled me with delight. I promptly reached out to a removal company, tasking them with clearing out my former home. Meanwhile, I accepted one of the offers right away, and I was getting ready to complete it. I arranged for the girls and investments, made sure Toby got paid, and got a portion of the cash for my safety. Protecting myself was still a priority as the week went on. Toby said the sale could move quickly, which made me happy. I quickly called a moving company to have them clear out my old home. Meanwhile, the girls talked to their mom, who got really angry and threatened them, saying the chaos would end soon. I gave them support on Tuesday morning. On a call with a new client who had met with Jack Walker to talk about a possible contract renewal, I learned about Walker Engineering's bad situation. The client told me that because of a big loss of projects, the company the girl's mom was pissed when she found out, and she threatened them. She said the chaos would end soon. I tried to make them feel better on Tuesday morning. I was talking to a new client who met with Jack Walker to talk about a contract renewal. I found out that Walker Engineering was in bad shape. The client said that they had to fire half of their staff because they didn't have enough projects. I also found out that Mrs. Walker decided to get divorced from Jack because he was unfaithful. But I didn't feel sorry for them. I was thinking about how much money I would make. I didn't know what happened to Olivia and her boyfriend. I knew he got my gift, and Mrs. Walker probably got hers too. The reason for their divorce was definitely I had to let half of my staff go. Also, I heard that Mrs. Walker is getting a divorce from Jack because he cheated on her. I didn't feel sorry for him, though. I was thinking about my commission checks. I didn't know what happened to Olivia and her boyfriend. I knew he got my gift, and Mrs. Walker's friends and family probably knew about her affair with an older man. Because of what I did, I got a new Land Rover Discovery HSE. I thought about getting a new car, but I decided to treat myself with the money I made. The company was doing really well, and I got a big commission of over $30,000. I was staring out of my office window at my new car when I saw a familiar Ford Focus pull into the parking lot. I figured it belonged to Diane's mom. I got ready for a showdown. Then my office phone rang. My secretary, Freya, told me there was a woman claiming to be my wife in the reception area. I told her to tell her to come in. I was looking out the window of my office when I saw a familiar Ford Focus pull into the parking lot. I figured it belonged to Diane H.'s mother, and I got ready for a showdown. But then my office phone rang. My secretary, Freya, told me that a woman was in the reception area, saying she was my wife. I told her to tell the woman that I was in a meeting and that I'd be down in an hour. 3 hours later, I looked out the window and saw her, still waiting. I decided to leave for the night, ready to confront her if I had to, or just drive past if she didn't spot me. I was about to get in my car when I heard tires screech. Before I knew it, she had me blocked in with her car, and she stormed toward me, clearly upset. She was wearing her sister's old clothes, her hair was a mess, and she looked exhausted. Damn it, she screamed, trying to slap me, but missing. She was so angry, and she wanted retribution. I invited her to calm down. She had blocked me on social media. She came out of her car, looking furious. She was wearing her sister's old clothes, and her hair was a mess. She screamed at me, trying to slap me, but she missed. She was so angry, and she wanted revenge. I invited her to sit in the car with me. She was surprised by the new car, and she told me how hard it was for her to pay for things. She begged me to come back. I told her that I couldn't give her what she wanted, and I didn't fit with her younger lovers. I said I was redundant in her life. Then, she begged me to come home. She said she wanted to move past the situation and forgive me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. She asked if she was dreaming. I asked her if she was serious. She said she forgave me for messing up her stuff and her life. I asked her if she was sure about forgiving me for cheating on her and being disrespectful. I told her I'd never be with her again and suggested she go be with one of her other lovers. She said her friends treated her differently. I asked her if she was serious. She said she forgave me for messing up her stuff and her life. I asked her if she was really sure about forgiving me, since I'd cheated on her and been disrespectful, and she'd been hurt and angry. I told her I was never going to be with her again and that she should go be with one of her other lovers. She said her friends treated her differently now that they were separated. I told her I still felt sorry for her, even though she'd cheated on me and been greedy and disrespectful. She said she was dealing with the consequences of her actions, and that she'd ruined her life because she was greedy and disrespectful. But I knew I had to move forward. She begged me to come back into her life, saying she had now that they were separated and their husbands questioned their fidelity while acknowledging some responsibility for her misfortunes. I still sympathized with her. She admitted to facing consequences for her actions, having squandered a good life due to greed and disrespect. Despite this, I knew I had to move forward. She pleaded for me to come back into her life, claiming to have nothing left. She inquired about her share of the house and mentioned her need for a divorce. I pointed out that she had never once said she loved me, stating that she just needed me, but I didn't need her. I disclosed that I had defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, admitting to lying. Her reaction was one of shock, and I understood the purpose of her visit, declaring my desire. She asked about her share of the house and said she needed a divorce. I told her she never said she loved me and that she just needed me, but I didn't need her. I told her I defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, and I'd lied. She was shocked. I understood why she was there, and she said she wanted a divorce. She said she loved me after being with me for over 20 years, and she was sorry for making a mistake. She said she'd been punished severely. I told her it was a huge mistake, and I'd never go back to her. She screamed and begged, and I told her I'd never come back. She offered to have a clean break and said she'd take 30,000 in cash if she agreed. Her attitude shifted, and she became resolute. She yelled, threatening to fight me in court for everything, asserting that I didn't lose the house and was too SM for that. I found myself on the defensive. I started by stating firmly that she wouldn't get a penny from me. She squared up to me, and I explained that I would fight her for everything and more. I asserted that she had no money, and I would move my assets around to make it difficult for her to track them down. I warned her that by the time her lawyer found that the bill would wipe out any gain, I told her she could take the money or face the consequences of an illegal battle, but she never broke eye contact. She exclaimed angrily, expressing love and accusing me of mistreatment. She said that thanks to her, our girls would thrive, contrasting their future virtues with her perceived shortcomings. I told her to take the money and get out of my life, and she agreed to take the money and proceed with the divorce. I said I would arrange it, and she exited She slammed the car door and drove off from the parking lot a few minutes later. The next day, I started the divorce process and said the reason was infidelity. A week later, I met with Holly at the girls' apartment. Even though I had sold my house, I waited to invest until the papers were signed. It was hard to be civil around the girls. I gave Holly the cash, and she signed the papers. After saying goodbye to the girls and wishing Holly luck, I was about to leave when Holly suddenly started crying. I had a feeling it might have been better for the girls, so Sophie and Ava exchanged knowing glances. Ava mentioned seeing me next weekend, talking about the Coldplay concert they were excited about. I went back to the room where Holly was still sobbing, and the others didn't notice. I suddenly got what Ava meant about the concert. Sophie asked about our plans, and I mentioned checking with Amy and letting them know during the week before we left. I ignored Holly, shouting as I left, and closed the door behind me.